Welcome to my channel
They say we got
HFY
attached
Universe.
with each other.
The alien Empress screamed as the blast doors of her throne chamber collapsed behind her. Metal twisted like paper. Alarms howled through the imperial palace of Valera Prime. And somewhere deep in the corridors, something was slaughtering her guards. No one could stop it. Not anymore. Empress Lysara stood frozen at the center of the grand chamber, her silver eyes reflecting the burning holograms of her falling empire. Entire fleet formations were gone. Orbital defenses, silent. Planetary shields, breached. And now, the enemy was inside the palace itself. Then came the sound. A step. Low. Deliberate. Getting closer. Her remaining guards tightened formation around her. But their hands were shaking. One of them whispered, "It's Vaker." That name changed everything. Supreme Commander Vaker. The warlord who had erased 12 civilizations without negotiation. The one who turned planets into warnings. Even speaking his name felt like surrender. The chamber doors exploded inward. Smoke rolled in like a living thing. And from it came death. Elite enemy soldiers poured into the room. Black armor. Red optics. No emotion. The royal guards fired first. But they were already too late. Within seconds, the chamber turned into chaos. Energy bolts tore through marble pillars. The air burned with plasma discharge. And one by one, Lysara's guards fell. Then it happened. They broke. Not all at once, but enough. Her elite protection force, trained for decades, began to retreat. Then run. The Empress stepped back in shock. "No," she whispered. But it was real. Her guards were abandoning her. The throne room was emptying. Fear had defeated loyalty. And in less than a minute, she was exposed. Completely. Only one figure did not move. Human. Captain Daniel Hayes. Earth's assigned liaison within the Imperial Guard. He stood near the shattered entrance, holding his rifle steady. No panic in his eyes. No hesitation. Only focus. Lysara looked at him like he didn't belong in this moment. "You're still here," she said quietly. Daniel didn't look at her. "They haven't reached you yet." A guard shouted from behind him. "Human, fall back." Daniel finally glanced over. "No." The word was simple. Final. Another explosion shook the chamber. The ceiling cracked. And then the attackers came fully inside. Wave after wave. Daniel moved instantly. First shot. A soldier dropped. Second shot. Another fell. Clean. Controlled. Efficient. The enemies hesitated. That hesitation cost them lives. Because Daniel was not fighting like a soldier meant to survive. He was fighting like something that had already decided the outcome. Lysara watched stunned. Humans were not supposed to be this precise. Not supposed to be this calm under extinction-level pressure. But Daniel kept stepping forward. Between her and everything trying to kill her, a plasma bolt struck his armor. The impact threw him sideways. A burn tore across his shoulder plating. Lysara gasped. "Captain!" But Daniel didn't fall. He adjusted his stance. And fired again. Blood hit the marble floor. Still, he didn't retreat. Another shot hit his side. His breathing changed. He was wounded now. Seriously. And still, he stayed in front of her. The attackers started slowing. Something was wrong. One of them shouted, "Why won't he drop?" No answer. Because none of them understood. Pain meant collapse. Collapse meant death. But the human kept moving anyway. Lysara's mind couldn't process it. This was not bravery. This was something else. Something deeper. Something terrifying. Then everything stopped for half a second. 'Cause the smoke shifted. And a new presence entered the chamber. The enemy parted instantly. Even their own soldiers stepped back. Fear spread through them like a virus. Then he appeared. Supreme Commander Vaker. 9 feet of armored dominance. His presence crushed silence itself. He looked at the battlefield. Then at Daniel. Then at Lysara. And smiled. "So," Vaker said softly. This is what remains of your protection. Daniel raised his rifle again. Even injured, even alone. Vaker laughed. You are dying, human. Daniel wiped blood from his lip. Then stopped talking. The chamber went silent again. Something shifted. The warlord studied him more carefully now. Not as prey, but as anomaly. As something that should not exist. You stand alone, Vaker said. Daniel answered without emotion. She is under my protection. That sentence changed the air in the room. Even the soldiers behind Vaker stopped moving. 'Cause it didn't sound like strategy. Sounded like truth. Absolute truth. Vaker's smile faded slightly. And then, the palace trembled. A deep shockwave rolled through the entire planet. Every screen in the chamber flickered. A system-wide alert appeared. Unknown human fleet has entered the system. Silence. Total silence. Vaker stopped moving. Lysara's breath caught. Daniel, still standing between them, exhaled slowly. Blood mixing with a faint smile. And for the first time, the galaxy's most feared warlord hesitated. The silence after the message was worse than the battle. Unknown human fleet has entered the system. The words burned across every shattered display in the throne chamber. No one moved. Not Lysara. Not the enemy soldiers. Not even Supreme Commander Vaker. Because fleets were not supposed to appear without warning. And humans were not supposed to have fleets at all. Yet the space above Valera Prime began to change. Sensors screamed. Orbital platforms detected mass signatures forming out of nothing. Faster than jump calculations should allow. Impossible formations. They arrived. Space tore open like reality itself was breaking. And human ships emerged. Not one. Not 10. Hundreds. Silent. Perfect formation. No warning broadcast. No diplomatic signal. Just arrival. Vaker's voice dropped for the first time. That's not possible. Lysara stared at the sky feed, her hands trembling. Humanity had always been classified as a minor emerging civilization. Weak. Unimportant. Protected under galactic observation laws. So why did this fleet look like an execution armada? Back inside the throne chamber, Daniel still stood between Lysara and Vaker. Blood ran down his armor. His breathing was heavier now. But his eyes had changed. Calm before storm. Vaker turned slowly toward him. You lied, the warlord said quietly. Daniel didn't answer. You are not alone. Daniel finally spoke. No, was. Never have been. The chamber felt colder. Even the enemy soldiers looked uncertain now. 'Cause something had shifted. Power balance had broken. Above the planet, human ships began positioning. Not attacking. Waiting. Like predators holding breath. Vaker's grip tightened on his plasma blade. You think a fleet changes anything? He asked. Daniel took a slow step forward. It already has. The warlord's eyes narrowed. And then he smiled again. But this time it was forced. Even if your ships destroy mine, Vaker said, this palace falls before they reach us. He raised his blade slightly. And I still kill her. The moment snapped. Daniel moved instantly. Not backward. Forward. He closed the distance in a single motion and slammed into Vaker's strike path. A plasma blade met human armor. The impact exploded light across the chamber. Daniel screamed but didn't stop. He grabbed the blade with his gauntlet. Metal melted instantly. Skin burned through protection layers. But he held it. Lysara gasped in horror. Stop, she shouted. But Daniel didn't listen. His voice came through clenched pain. You will not touch her. Vaker stared at him at point-blank range. For the first time, confusion crossed his face. You are already dying, the warlord said. Daniel's answer was broken. But absolute. Then I die here. The chamber shook again. Another wave of explosions echoed from outside. Human ships were engaging. The battle for orbit had begun. Vaker pulled harder on his blade. Daniel's knees hit the floor. He was losing. Rest. Blood pooled beneath him. Lysara stepped forward instinctively. But Daniel shouted without looking back. "Don't move." That stopped her. Not command. Not authority. Something deeper. Trust. A massive explosion rocked the palace walls. The enemy soldiers stumbled. One of them screamed into comms. "We are losing orbital support." Vaker froze. For the first time, uncertainty cracked his dominance. Because warlords do not lose skies. They take them. But outside, the sky was no longer his. Daniel's grip loosened slightly. He was slipping. Vaker leaned in close. "You cannot win this," he whispered. Daniel looked up through blood and smoke. "I already did." A distant sound echoed through the palace. Not explosions. Not alarms. Footsteps again. But this time heavier. Stronger. Rhythmic. Then the walls exploded inward. Not enemy fire. Not palace collapse. Breach. And through it stepped human reinforcements. Armored. Focused. Perfect coordination. Not soldiers. Operators. One of them scanned the chamber instantly. Target locked. And then their commander spoke over open channel. "Captain Hayes. We have containment." Vaker slowly turned his head. For the first time, he realized. This wasn't a rescue. It was an extraction. And everyone in this room was already marked. The chamber was no longer a battlefield. It was a judgment zone. Human operators had entered like a silent storm. Every step they took was synchronized. Every weapon already calibrated. Every target already known. And in the center of it all, Daniel Hayes was still on his knees. Burned. Bleeding. Refusing to fall fully. Lysara stood frozen behind him, unable to process what she was seeing. These humans did not move like soldiers. They moved like inevitability. Supreme Commander Vaker slowly looked around the chamber. For the first time in his life, he was surrounded. Not by fear, but by control. One of the human operators raised a hand slightly. No panic. Only precision. "Containment grid active," the operator said. Another voice answered through comms. "Orbital control secured. Enemy fleet collapsing." Lysara's breath stopped. "Collapsing," she whispered. Above the planet, the alien defense network was failing. Not slowly. Not strategically. Instantly. Like someone had switched off the war. Vaker tightened his grip on his weapon. "This is impossible," he said. But his voice was no longer confident. It was defensive. Daniel finally pushed himself upright again. His legs shook. But he stood. Still between Lysara and Vaker. Still refusing to move. The commander of the human unit stepped forward. He looked at Daniel first. Then at the Empress. Then at Vaker. And spoke one sentence. "Asset secured." That sentence changed everything. Lysara turned slowly. "Asset," she whispered. Daniel didn't look at her. But his voice was quiet now. "She's under Earth Protection Protocol." Vaker laughed once. Sharp, broken sound. "Earth," he repeated. "You call this primitive species Earth?" The human commander tilted his head slightly. "Primitive is not the correct classification anymore." Silence fell again. Then the commander continued. "You breached protected diplomatic territory. You attacked a sovereign under human protection status. You engaged an active protector unit." Vaker's eyes narrowed. "And?" The commander finally looked directly at him. "And now you are in violation of containment law." All units. Confirm engagement permission." The chamber changed instantly. Every human weapon raised in perfect synchronization. No shouting. No chaos. Just activation. Vaker realized something terrifying. He was not fighting individuals. He was inside a system. A system designed to end wars. Not win them. Daniel staggered slightly but refused to move away from Lysara. The Empress finally stepped closer behind him. Her voice trembled. Why are you doing this? Daniel didn't look back. Because you were alone. That answer hit harder than any weapon. Lysara froze. Not because it made sense. 'Cause it didn't. No empire required this level of protection for one person. Unless humans valued something differently. Something she did not understand. Vaker suddenly raised his blade again. No system decides my end, he snarled. He moved. Violent. Final charge. But he never reached Daniel. 'Cause the world stopped. Not metaphorically. Literally. A pulse of energy expanded through the chamber. Every enemy soldier dropped instantly. Not dead. Disabled. Frozen. Only Vaker remained standing. Barely. He turned his head slowly. What did you do? He whispered. The human commander answered calmly. Non-lethal neural suppression field. Was. Then colder. You are now contained. Vaker trembled. For the first time, the warlord could not move. Not because he was weak, but because someone had decided he would not. Daniel finally collapsed fully to one knee. Lysara rushed forward instinctively, catching him before he fell. Her hands shook as she held him. You're dying, she said. Daniel gave a faint breath. Still here. She stared at him. Confusion. Fear. Something else forming underneath. Respect. Maybe even something deeper. Above them, the human commander spoke again. Extraction ready. But then, a new signal broke through all channels. Unknown. Encrypted. Ancient. And it was not human. Or Vaker's. Every screen in the palace flickered again. And a single line appeared. Galactic Tribunal authorization override initiated. The human commander's expression changed for the first time. Just slightly. But enough. He turned toward Daniel. We are not alone in this judgment. Daniel's eyes narrowed weakly. Then it just got bigger. And somewhere beyond the system, something answered. The moment the words appeared, everything changed. Galactic Tribunal authorization override initiated. Even the human operators froze for half a second. Not fear. Calculation. Something far older than war had just entered the battlefield. Lysara held Daniel tightly as alarms across the palace flickered into unfamiliar sequences. Not imperial codes. Not human protocols. Something deeper. Something ancient. Supreme Commander Vaker still stood in neural suppression. His body locked in place, eyes burning with silent rage. But now even he had stopped struggling. 'Cause he understood one thing clearly. This was no longer conquest. This was judgment. Above Valera Prime, the human fleet shifted formation. But not into attack posture. Into something else. A ring. A containment sphere around the entire planet. Like the world itself had been placed inside a cage made of stars. Daniel coughed weakly. Lysara leaned closer. Stay with me, she whispered. Daniel gave a faint, broken exhale. I didn't come this far to leave early. A small silence passed between them. Then the human commander spoke into comms. All units hold. Tribunal signal confirmed. One of the operators asked quietly. Are we the enforcers or witnesses? Was. Then the answer came. Both. The sky darkened again. But not from ships. From something beyond ships. A projection formed above the planet. Massive. Unreal. A rotating structure of light and geometry. Spanning orbital space like a divine machine. Lysara's eyes widened. What is that? She whispered. Daniel answered softly. Accountability. The tribunal spoke. Not in voice, but in meaning. Every being present understood it instantly. A civilization-level intelligence reviewing the conflict. The destruction of fleets. The breach of protected status. The attack on a guarded sovereign. And the human intervention. Vaker finally spoke through strained breath. This is not law, he growled. This is domination dressed as order. The tribunal responded. Not to him, but to the record. Violation confirmed. Containment justified. Enforcement authorized. The words echoed through space itself. Vaker's armor flickered as systems began shutting down permanently. Not destroyed. Decommissioned. Erased from function. He dropped to his knees for the first time. Not from injury. From inevitability. Lysara watched in stunned silence. Entire warlord. Entire fleet commander. Reduced to nothing by a verdict. She turned to Daniel slowly. "You live inside this," she whispered. Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "No, Oz. We're just the ones willing to stand in front of it." Above them, the tribunal shifted focus. A new directive appeared across every system. Subject: Human Protector Unit. Captain Daniel Hayes. Lysara stiffened. Subject. Daniel's expression changed slightly. That was not expected. Even for him. The human commander stepped forward. "No," he said immediately into comms. "Classification error. Reclassify." Silence. Then the tribunal responded again. Reviewing. The entire planet felt that pause. Even air felt heavier. Reclassification denied. Lysara looked at Daniel sharply. "What does that mean?" she demanded. Daniel didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, he looked uncertain. Above them, the tribunal continued. Humanity status. Under observation escalation. Daniel whispered under his breath. "They're watching us now." The human commander turned slightly. "Captain, what did you do?" Daniel stared at the sky projection. "I didn't do anything." Oz. Then quieter. "That's the problem." The tribunal issued one final line. Prior incidents match pattern. Human protective extremity behavior classified as anomalous. Lysara tightened her grip on him. "You protected me," she said. Daniel nodded slightly. "Yeah." Above them, the light structure rotated again. And then the final message appeared. Protocol update initiated. Human intervention events will no longer be contained. All observers are now part of the system. Silence fell across the galaxy. The tribunal vanished. Just like that. No explosion. No signal fade. Just absence. Vaker collapsed fully unconscious. The enemy forces remained frozen. The fleet above slowly disengaged containment formation. And for the first time since the invasion began, the war was over. Lysara looked at Daniel, still injured, still breathing, still human. "Why did they react like that?" she whispered. Daniel's eyes stayed on the empty sky. "Because we don't stop," he said. "Oz. Even when we should." Far above the planet, somewhere in the dark between systems, something began logging Earth. Not as a minor civilization anymore, but as a variable that could not be ignored. And the galaxy started paying attention. The silence after the tribunal's disappearance was unnatural. No alarms, no war signals, no orbiting destruction, just stillness over Valera Prime. As if reality itself was waiting to see what humans would do next. Inside the shattered throne chamber, Lysara still held Daniel. His breathing was shallow now. His armor was burned through in multiple places. But he was alive. Barely. Human medics rushed in through the breach, moving with fast, precise urgency. One of them scanned Daniel instantly. "Critical condition," the medic said. "Stabilize him now." Lysara stepped back as they worked. Her hands trembled. She had seen empires fall. She had seen fleets erased. But she had never seen someone survive like this. For her. Daniel's eyes slowly opened again. He looked at her first. Not the medics. Not the battlefield. "You okay?" he whispered. Lysara froze. That question, after everything. After collapse. After war. After a warlord and a tribunal and a fleet of impossible ships. He was asking about her. "Yes," she said softly. "I am." Oz. Then her voice cracked slightly. "You should not be alive." Daniel gave a faint, tired breath. "Yeah. I get that a lot." Nearby, Vaker was being secured in containment restraints. The once feared warlord now knelt, unconscious, surrounded by silent human operators. Not killed, not executed, contained. As if his fate was no longer a question of revenge, but procedure. Lysara watched him briefly, then looked back at Daniel. "I don't understand your species," she admitted. Daniel's eyes drifted toward the broken ceiling above them. "We don't really understand it either." That answer felt honest and terrifying, because even humans seemed aware that they were not normal. A human commander approached, lowering his weapon slightly. "Captain Hayes," he said, "we have full orbital control. System secured." Daniel nodded slightly. "Casualties?" The commander hesitated. "Minimal. Enemy fleet neutralized without extinction-level escalation." Lysara caught the wording immediately. Without extinction-level escalation. As if humans had the capability, but chose not to use it. That thought alone made her throat tighten. The commander continued. "Tribunal trace has fully dissolved. No further external observation detected." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Good." But his tone didn't sound relieved. Sounded cautious. Lysara stepped closer. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. The commander answered instead. "Diplomatic extraction. Empress Lysara will be transferred to Earth protection custody until political stabilization is confirmed." Lysara blinked. "Custody?" Daniel immediately opened his eyes. "No," he said sharply. The commander looked at him. "Captain, protocol requires." Daniel pushed himself slightly up despite the pain. "She is not a detainee." Silence. Even the medics paused. Daniel continued, voice weaker but firm. "She is a protected sovereign, not a prisoner." The commander studied him, then slowly nodded. "Understood. Exception granted." Lysara stared at Daniel. Even half dead, he was still arguing for her status, still protecting her position, still refusing to reduce her to an object of procedure. Something inside her shifted. Quietly, deeply. The medics finally stabilized Daniel enough to move him. But before they lifted him, Lysara placed her hand gently on his arm. "Why?" she asked again. Daniel looked at her. This time longer. Like the question finally deserved weight. Then he answered. "Because no one else was going to stand there." "And you didn't deserve to be alone when it mattered." The words landed heavier than anything before. Lysara didn't respond. Because there was nothing to argue against. Only understanding. Far above the planet, human ships began slowly withdrawing. Not fleeing. Not conquering. Leaving a shadow of control behind like a warning to the galaxy itself. And somewhere in the deep void between stars, a new message began propagating through unknown networks. Not from the tribunal, not from Vaker, but from observers who had been silent for far too long. Subject classification updated. Humans. Active cosmic stability factor. And beneath it, a second line appeared. Risk level. Unknown. Response protocol. Watch closely. Back on Valera Prime, Daniel was lifted onto a stretcher. Lysara followed him instinctively. Not as an empress, but as someone who had just realized something impossible. This human had not just saved her life. He had changed the way the galaxy looked at existence itself. Daniel turned his head slightly as he was carried away. "You're still alive," he said softly. Lysara nodded. "Yes." Faint pause. "Because of you." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Then, almost like it surprised him too. "You're welcome." And as the med bay doors closed, the galaxy quietly began preparing for something it had never faced before. A species that did not break when it should. And did not stop when everything told it to. 3 days after the battle, Valera Prime no longer felt like a conquered world. Felt watched. Human ships still lingered in high orbit. Not attacking. Not occupying. just present, like a silent promise that things would not go backwards. Inside the Imperial Recovery Hall, Empress Lysara stood by a sealed observation window. Beyond it, Daniel Hayes lay in a stabilization pod. Alive, recovering, but still broken by the price of what he had done. Medical drones moved around him with precision. His body was healing slower than expected. Even human medtech seemed concerned. Lysara had not left his side since the war ended. Not once. One of her advisors approached cautiously. "Your Majesty, the Council is waiting. The Empire requires direction after the Vaker incident." She didn't turn. "The Empire is still here," she said quietly. "That is direction enough." The advisor hesitated. "Because of the humans." That statement hung in the air. Lysara finally looked at him. "No," she said. "Was. Because of him." Inside the pod, Daniel's eyes slowly opened. He was awake again. Weak, but aware. A medic noticed instantly. "He's conscious." Lysara stepped forward immediately as access was granted. The pod opened slightly. Cold mist escaped. Daniel blinked, adjusting to light. Then he saw her. "You keep showing up," he said faintly. Lysara gave a small, uncertain expression. "You keep getting yourself destroyed." A faint breath of something like a laugh left him. "Fair." Silence settled between them. Strangely calm now. No explosions. No collapsing empires. Just two survivors of something too large to name easily. Lysara studied him carefully. "You changed everything," she said. Daniel shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. I just didn't move." That answer disturbed her more than any weapon ever had. Because it implied something simple. Too simple. And yet galaxy-breaking. Outside the recovery hall, human operators were speaking quietly. Their tone was different now. Less tactical. More uncertain. "The tribunal incident wasn't supposed to escalate like that," one said. Another responded. "It didn't escalate. It reacted." To him. Inside the room, Lysara leaned closer. "Daniel, what exactly are you?" Question hung there. Heavy. Not hostile. Not fearful. Just honest. Daniel stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then answered softly. "I used to think I was just a soldier." Now I'm not sure that's enough anymore." Lysara frowned slightly. "That doesn't answer me." He finally looked at her directly. "I know." A longer silence. The station alarms suddenly flickered. Not emergency. Not attack. Signal reception. A human priority transmission. All personnel paused instantly. The command channel activated. A new voice entered. Controlled. Absolute authority. "Captain Hayes," the voice said. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Lysara sensed it immediately. This was higher than the commander. Higher than anything she had seen. "Yes," Daniel replied. The voice continued. "Report confirmed. Tribunal response documented. Galactic observers now active." Then the line that changed everything again. "Earth High Command requests immediate return of the asset." Lysara stiffened. "Asset?" she repeated quietly. Daniel's expression didn't change. But something in his eyes did. Recognition. Concern. Maybe even resignation. The voice continued. "Containment protocol has been upgraded. You are no longer field deployable without oversight." Silence fell. Then Daniel spoke. "Understood." Lysara turned sharply. "You're leaving." Daniel didn't answer immediately. The pod slowly closed around him again. Not fully sealing. Just enough to stabilize. He finally looked at her. "I don't know," he said honestly. But if Earth calls, I have to go." Lysara stepped closer to the glass. Her voice lowered. "And what am I supposed to do then?" For the first time, Daniel hesitated. Not as a soldier, but as a human. Then he said quietly, "Stay alive." That was it. No promise. No certainty. Just survival. The pod sealed fully. Engines beneath the station shifted. Earth extraction vessels began docking procedures. Lysara watched as the humans prepared to take him away. Not as a hero. Not as a weapon. But as something they were not fully in control of. Outside, the fleet above Valera Prime began to move. Slowly. Leaving orbit. But before they did, every ship broadcast a single encrypted signal across the system. Untranslated, but repeated across all channels. Lysara's translator finally decoded part of it. Protector status. Active. Threat response. Immediate. Entity, humanity. Classification. Do not engage alone. Her breath caught. Not fear. Not confusion. Understanding. 'Cause now she knew. The galaxy wasn't reacting to Daniel Hayes. It was reacting to what he represented. And he was only one human. As the ships vanished into jump space, Lysara remained at the window, watching the empty sky. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never felt as an empress. Not power, not control, but distance, because whatever humans were, they were now part of something far larger than her empire. And Daniel Hayes was just the beginning. Earth was never supposed to look like this. From orbit it appeared calm. Blue oceans, green continents, soft clouds drifting like peace itself. But every alien fleet that had ever approached it learned the same truth too late. Earth was not peaceful. It was waiting. Inside Earth High Command, the atmosphere was nothing like the planet outside. No celebration. No relief. Only silence. Daniel Hayes stood in the center of a restricted briefing chamber. Still recovering, still bandaged, still carrying the weight of Valera Prime in every step he took. Across from him, the highest-ranking human officers watched him carefully. Not like a hero. Not like a failure. Like a variable they did not fully understand yet. One of them finally spoke. Captain Hayes. Your actions triggered First Contact Tribunal escalation. Daniel exhaled slowly. I didn't trigger it, he said. I just protected a target. That was enough. The room went still again. Lysara was not present physically, but she was present in the data streams being reviewed across the table. Every second of the Valera incident had been reconstructed. Every shot. Every decision. Every moment Daniel stood between her and extinction. Another officer leaned forward. You engaged Supreme Commander Vaker alone. Daniel nodded. Yes. And survived. A heavier silence followed that statement. Because that part still didn't compute. Survival was expected. But not like that. Not against that level of force. Finally, the lead commander spoke. Captain. Your classification is under review. Daniel already knew what that meant. Grade. Or removal from field. He didn't react. But then the commander added something different. However, the tribunal response is what concerns us more. Daniel looked up slightly. Yeah, he said quietly. That wasn't normal. No, the commander agreed. It was recognition. That word made the air shift. Recognition. As if something larger had identified Earth. And reacted personally. The commander continued. Whatever those observers were. They didn't just watch you. They categorized you. Daniel's expression darkened slightly. That's worse. The commander nodded. It is. A holographic display activated in the center of the room. Galactic networks. Unknown signatures. Fragmented tribunal traces. And one repeating pattern. Human intervention events. Increasing frequency. Human protective behavior. Unpredictable. Human casualty response. Extreme self-sacrifice loop detected. An analyst whispered. It keeps repeating like it's learning us. Daniel stepped closer. It is. The room turned toward him. He continued, voice low. You don't understand. That thing didn't judge Vaker first. It watched me. Silence. Heavy. Then another officer asked carefully, "Why would it matter what one soldier does?" Daniel looked at them. Because he had stopped being just one soldier a long time ago. "I think," he said slowly, "it thinks that's how we all are." No one spoke after that. Because if that was true, then humanity was no longer just a civilization. It was a pattern. One the galaxy could not predict, or control, or ignore. Meanwhile, far beyond known space, something responded again. Not the tribunal, not Earth Command. Something older, deeper. A network that had not activated in millennia. And it had one question repeating across the void. Why does humanity refuse to step back? Back on Earth, Daniel stood alone in a corridor after the briefing ended. His reflection in the glass looked the same. But he didn't feel the same. Lysara's voice came through a secured channel in his wrist device. "Are they sending you away?" she asked. He hesitated. "Maybe." Was. Then her voice softened. "Then what happens to me?" Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. For the first time, he didn't have an answer that fit procedure. Only truth. "I don't know," he said. A long silence passed. Then Lysara spoke again. "You told me to stay alive." "Yes, I did." That made him pause. Something in his chest tightened slightly. But he didn't say it. Instead he asked quietly, "Are they treating you well?" A faint pause on the other end. "Yes," she said. Then softer. "But I feel like I'm being studied." Daniel opened his eyes. "That's because you are." Another silence. Then Lysara said something unexpected. "Daniel, I think they are afraid of you." He gave a faint, tired breath. "No," he said. "They're afraid of what I didn't do." Lysara didn't respond immediately, because that made even less sense. And yet, it felt true. Far above Earth, deep in classified orbit, new fleet orders were being generated. Not for war, not for peace, but for something in between. Observation continued. Contact protocols reduced. Human engagement rule. Do not provoke hero response behavior. The galaxy had learned something new. Humans were not dangerous because they attacked. They were dangerous because they would not stop protecting once they decided something mattered. And Daniel Hayes was the clearest example of that truth.